Today we will recap a movie in which a psycho took 20 years from a man's life without no reason, and what happened to him after that will shock you. And to know this movie's name? Watch the video till the end. In the beginning, we're introduced to Joe Doucette, who is an alcoholic and a short-tempered advertising executive. Joe's boss tells him that the clients he's about to see today are extremely important for the business and he must not lose them at any cost. After his employer leaves, Joe gets a call from his ex-wife Donna. Donna angrily bursts at him on call and asks him why he hasn't shown up for their daughter's birthday. But he feels no remorse about it, nor does he feel any sort of obligation to see either his wife or daughter at all. He tells her the 3-year-old wouldn't care about this, and he prioritizes attending a business meeting with his clients, a couple. Joe notices that his ideas are impressing the woman. As soon as her husband leaves to take a call, Joe starts flirting with her. He ends up getting rejected by the woman and gets found out by the client. Having lost a major deal, Joe begins to drink excessively. At some point decides to buy a toy for his daughter from a street vendor. Then he stumbles into his friend Chucky's bar and asks him to let him have more alcohol. Chucky notices his unstable state and refuses because the bar is closed. Joe walks away, but then he encounters a woman in the middle of the street holding a yellow umbrella. He goes near her, and the scene changes. Chucky later opens his door to see Joe's toy on the floor, but Joe has nowhere to be found. Joe later wakes up in a hotel room, presumably after clapping the woman he met on the street earlier. The woman is nowhere to be found. Not only that, Joe soon realizes that the cupboard is filled with plain white clothes. He looks around the room and realizes that he's locked inside. Soon after, a tray of food gets slid down the doggy door. Joe forces his head through and begs to be let go. A few days pass like this, with the captors providing Joe with dumplings from a Chinese restaurant as food and alcohol. It frustrates him at some point, but Joe slowly resigns to his fate as a prisoner in a strange room. Having nothing else to do, he spends most of his time watching TV in the room. One day, while watching a fitness video, he starts touching his bowl, right when white fog seeps out of the vents and knocks him unconscious. While Joe is unconscious, unseen personnel enter the room and begin taking DNA samples of him. One day, while Joe's watching TV, Joe learns that his wife had been raped and murdered, leaving his 3-year-old daughter Mia to get put up for adoption. Joe further learns that he is being considered the prime suspect. This indicates that his captors collected his samples to frame him. One day he hears a man's laughter and sees someone sitting on his bed. However, when he happily approaches him, the man disappears, indicating that it was only a hallucination. Days turn into months, and the desperately lonely Joe even goes as far as smearing his pillow with blood, forming what looks like a badly drawn cartoon face. Not only that, he befriends a white rat in the room, until one day the rat gives birth to small pinky rats. Joe falls asleep next to his rat buddies, but when he wakes up, they're gone. Confused, Joe walks back to the bedroom, and sees his daily meal tray get slid inside. However, this meal is slightly different. He wails in agony at the sight of his rat friend and its baby's dead served on the plate. This shatters him. He breaks a mirror in the room and uses a glass shard to injure his wrist. And the next time he wakes up, he's all patched up. Moreover, his capture has removed the shattered mirror that Joe used to cut his arm, so that he may not try to end his life again. Years go by. Joe relies on the television in the room to catch up on the outside world. He smiles in relief when he learns that Mia has been adopted by 2 loving parents. He also watches her play cello on the TV, which makes him extremely happy. This provides Joe with newfound hope. Therefore, he begins to write letters to his daughter, hoping that once he gets out, his daughter will get to read them. He also decides to quit drinking and get in shape so that he can take revenge one day. Joe comes up with an escape plan. Over the years, Joe manages to pull out some bricks from the wall of his washroom and makes a small opening for an escape. He crawls through it and follows a dark tunnel, until he reaches the end, and kicks his way through. Joe then returns to the room to retrieve the letters he wrote to his daughter. However, just as he's about to leave, he sees Mia's interview on TV. While talking to her, the TV show host asks Mia if she would forgive her father for disappearing. In the interview, Mia says that if her father Joe is still alive, she's willing to try to forgive him, even though he killed her mother. Just then, gas is released into Joe's room. He tries to escape but fails and passes out. Joe wakes up later in a trunk placed out in an open field. He has his letters with him, along with some cash, and a smartphone that shows a countdown. Then he spots the woman with the yellow umbrella standing at a distance and immediately goes after her. Joe keeps calling to her, but the woman doesn't stop. When he finally reaches her and grabs her, the woman loudly tells him to get off of her. Then he gets interrupted by a group of football players who thinks he is harassing the woman. Joe easily beats up the football players before resuming on his way. Joe again starts following the lady. He finds a man holding the umbrella, and roughly asks him where the woman went. Since Joe's action caused a scene, this prompts a nurse named Marie to walk up to him and softly ask him if he's okay. She hands him her card. Joe takes it and leaves. Joe goes to meet his old friend Chucky. After 20 years of disappearance, he tells Chucky everything. As the two are talking, Joe gets a call from someone who tells him that he kidnapped Mia. He tells him that he'll keep in touch and hangs up. After the call ends, Joe then asks Chucky to help him track down whoever did this to him, which is no easy task because Joe has quite a long list of people he wronged in the past. In the morning, Chucky finds him lying unconscious on the floor. He finds Marie's card in Joe's pocket and calls her for help. Marie comes and takes care of Joe. She asks Chucky about him, but Chucky refuses to tell her much since he's not sure who to trust. When Chucky leaves for a moment, Marie finds the letters Joe wrote and starts reading them. Feeling violated, Joe yanks the letters away from her and begins acting aggressively. Marie calms him down by telling him that she believes his story, and is willing to help him to find his daughter and prove his innocence. Now accompanied by Marie, Joe continues his investigation to find the culprit behind his kidnapping and imprisonment. Later on, he comes up with another idea. He decides to try eating the dumplings served at every single Chinese restaurant, with the word dragon on its name, because it's the only thing he's been fed for the last 20 years. At some point during the search, Marie excuses herself because she has to go to work. Joe then resumes his search alone. He managed to track down the restaurant which supplied the dumplings. Joe starts observing the customers. When he sees someone checking out with a lot of food, he follows him in hopes that he would lead him to his captor. The man parks his car near some sort of facility. Joe eliminates him and takes the food inside. Once he is inside, he proceeds to kill the receptionist. Here we learn that Joe wasn't the only one held captive. Just like Joe, Cheney notices that the captives have still not been fed. He gets out of his room to check on his workers, but as he does, Joe attacks him. He tortures Cheney by cutting open flesh wounds all over his neck. Cheney tells him to reach for an audio recording and listen to it. In the recording, Cheney's employer simply tells him to lock up Joe for 20 years, without even stating the reason why. Shortly after, one of Cheney's men notices the dead guard. He calls for backup and runs to check on Cheney. Taking Cheney hostage, Joe gets out of the room. Before exiting the building, he throws Cheney at the men, but the men come after him. It's at this point that Joe shows what he got from being held in the strange room. In the end, Joe wins the fight but walks away with a stab wound to the back. Joe later awakens at Chucky's place. He overhears a conversation between Marie and her doctor friend, in which Marie is defending Joe and asking her friend not to report him to the police. The doctor enters Joe's room a while later and checks on his wound. Before leaving, he tells Joe not to hurt Marie, saying she's already been through a lot. After hearing this, Joe tells Marie to leave. While Joe is drinking at Chucky's bar, he receives a missed call from the kidnapper. When Joe calls him back, a phone starts ringing at Chucky's bar. A man picks it up, looking Joe right in the eye and saying, "It's time we met." Without thinking, Joe takes a knife and attacks the man. However, he is stopped by his female bodyguard. She is the same woman Joe had seen earlier with the umbrella. The man proceeds to give Joe 2 challenges which he must complete within the next 48 hours. 1. Joe must find out the man's identity. And 2. Joe must find out the reason why the man kidnapped and imprisoned him for 20 years. If Joe manages to find out the answers within 2 days, the man promises Joe $20 million worth of diamonds and proof of Joe's innocence in Donna's case. He'll release also his daughter Mia. He tells him that Cheney and his men are seeking revenge by hugging Marie. Joe rushes to Marie's aid, and there Joe is captured by Cheney's men. Just as Cheney is about to cut and tease Joe, he receives a call from the kidnapper, who offers Cheney a vast amount of money in return for Joe's release. Cheney accepts his offer and leaves with his men. Joe saves Marie and she starts crying on his shoulder. Unbeknownst to the two, the kidnapper is keeping watch on Joe and Marie. Then Joe gets another call from the man, and he notes that the same sound always plays in the background of each call. Joe and Marie determine through a music recognition app that the music is the anthem of the Evergreen Academy, which is a school Joe went to when he was younger. The two dig in further and realize that the school has now been closed. Luckily, they manage to find Joe's old headmistress, so the two decide to pay her a visit. Marie engages the headmistress in a conversation. Joe sneaks in through the back door to look for some information about the school. He finds a yearbook and recognizes one of his classmates, Adrian Doyle Price. After the visit, the two decide to take a rest and clean themselves up. Joe relays their classmate's name to Chucky and asks him if he remembers anything about him. Chucky seems not to remember him and apologizes to Joe. After taking a bath, Marie comes to change Joe's bandage. The tension between them is through the roof by now, and they start hugging each other, unaware that the kidnapper is watching through hidden cameras. While doing some research, Chucky learns that the kidnapper is indeed Adrian. While reading about Adrian's sister, something clicks in Chucky's head and he leaves Joe a message. However, Adrian intercepts and deletes the messages. Enraged by the way Chucky mentioned Adrian's sister, Adrian goes to Chucky's house and kills him. At night, Joe and Marie, who are still unaware of what is going on, sneak into the school and decide to study old school records. After digging through the records, Joe finds the record of Adrian's sister, Amanda. As Joe takes a trip back down the memory lane, he recalls that he used to bully her, and realizes that the man who imprisoned him was none other than Adrian Price, his old classmate and Amanda's brother. One day he saw her in the school greenhouse, being romantic with a much older man, and automatically assumed it was a teacher. Back to the present time, Joe and Marie do some more research and find out that the Price family moved after that. Later, the father eliminated his wife, his daughter Amanda, and then ended his life, leaving behind a severely wounded Adrian. They both return to the motel and Joe prepares to go to Adrian. Later on, he comes face to face with Adrian, and this time, he manages to kill Adrian's trusty bodyguard. Adrian tells Joe that he will give Mia to him along with everything he promised. But he needs the answers to his questions. First, Joe tells him that he's found out he's Adrian Doyle Price, and he imprisoned Joe because he blamed him for what happened to his family. Joe explains that he didn't know until this day, that the man Amanda was with that day was their father. Adrian reveals that his father had romantic relationships with both him and his sister. Joe's actions in the past led to an even worse outcome than simply ruining Amanda Price, Adrian's sister's self-esteem. Adrian's father was infuriated, as he saw this as a disgrace to their family's name. Covered in shame, one day the father simply snapped and decided to kill every single person in the family before killing himself. Adrian only managed to survive because the bullet missed his heart. Because Joe managed to figure it all out, Adrian presented him with the $20 million worth of diamonds, as promised. Not only that, he proceeds to lead Joe to another room to see his daughter. Adrian mentions that Joe never asked the most important question: why was he released? Adrian takes Joe to a room where he sees the sets of the TV shows Joe used to watch in captivity. It's revealed that everything Joe was shown on TV about Mia had been staged by the girl who was shown as Mia is actually a paid actress and a musician. Joe is enraged by this and begins to question where the real Mia is. Adrian says that to get to Mia, Joe needs to answer the last question: why he was released? With this, Adrian plays a slideshow, showing Joe pictures of his daughter from childhood to the present day. He explains that he changed her name, found her the right parents, and gave her the perfect environment to grow into a beautiful woman. Adrian managed to make them spend time together and finally make love to each other, so Joe would finally understand the pain that Adrian's family and especially his sister went through. Joe is now beyond disgusted and disappointed in himself. After having his perfect revenge, Adrian ends his life. The movie ends with Joe leaving a goodbye note to Marie along with the diamonds. In the note, he tells her that he cannot see her anymore and that he's done something unforgivable, that he needs to punish himself for it. Joe then uses some of the diamonds to pay Cheney to imprison him in his facility again for the rest of his life. So this was the story of Old Boy, which was released in 2013. If you like the story, then do watch the full film, and if you want to watch more such amazing recaps, then do subscribe to our channel. See you in the next recap.